Hey, I'm Nick Armstrong, and this is the Dear Fort Collins podcast. Every episode, we get a chance to talk to somebody who is in Fort Collins or the surrounding community, making our space better and more livable and a place that we really love to enjoy. And today, I have the happy luck, I guess, to talk to Mike OConnell, who is a retired entrepreneur. He and I have a long history. He's the former director of the SBDC here in Fort Collins, Larimer County, and the creator of a brand new documentary, The Squeeze on the Average American. Mike, welcome to the show.
Nick, thank you. It's great to see you, and thanks for all the work you're doing with this podcast. And yes, I've enjoyed our collaborations over the years. So good to see you again.
We used to party a lot at the Innisphere.
Yes, we did.
Over good food, good catering, lots of good drinks. We ignite Fort Collins, so many different events and other things like that. So what are you up to now? It seems like you're keeping pretty busy.
Yeah, I've been retired for almost 4 years now. My partner and I have traveled to Portugal. We've been to Italy. As you probably know, I'm a musician. I play a lot of brew pubs and places like that around northern Colorado and southern Wyoming. Have family members around the country. Still try to get in a good bike ride or a hike when I can. So staying in shapes to the extent I can anymore is important. But and I have a lot of good friends here in northern Colorado. So getting together with the lovely folks in NOCO is always great.
So tell me a little bit more about this documentary. I'm really intrigued.
As you mentioned, I'm the retired SBDC director, but before that, I owned a furniture manufacturing company. Before that, I was a corporate executive. A lot of the roles were sales and marketing based, and I was usually the person that got asked for factual information about our competitors, our product lines, the trends. If we raise prices, what's going to happen? So I was expected to have factual information about key parts of the business or the business marketplace. And it was important to know that versus just anecdotal information. So I got pretty frustrated probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I got tired of hearing just so much politically slanted or anecdotal or talking point info about our government. And I said, why can't we look at this thing the way that a senior manager would look at a product line or owner would look at his company? So that's when I started doing that. And it was kind of a rabbit hole for a while because I dug in pretty deep into that. But what I found data-wise from data points was a little disturbing, and hence the title, The Squeeze on the Average American. But I think the data is informative. I think it's important, and I think it's timely. And concerned Americans should take the time and the energy to be aware of this. And I know that people have, I'll say, stress on their time. So I've tried to make this succinct so that people can digest the information and see how their government is working for them as the client.
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen is the lead organizer of Founded in FOCO is an entrepreneurial conference. There's a lot of different information sources that people put their faith and trust in, and a lot of it does have that anecdotal tinge to it, which makes you question some of the decisions that are coming out of a lot of those data sets, or even just oh, I heard that such and such is happening, and so we're going to move in this direction now.
Yep.
And you just hope that it's the right direction for the small business and the local economy, because it's all tied together. What's the most important or impactful thing that you've learned so far?
A couple things. I am concerned about the fact that as a country, we have political arms where, unfortunately to me, the vast majority of our politicians, they don't work for their constituents anymore. They work for their donors. And when you look at some of the trends, you'll see why that is, where some things that are so apparent to be corrected or to make a change in, we seem unable to do that as a country because it's opposed to what the American citizen wants. I think that we've seen a corrosion of special interest money where it's clearly favoring the wealthy in our system as opposed to what Americans really need. So we moved away from the what I would call the greater good concept of taking care of the American citizen.
Yeah, and it's something that Robert Reich and some of these other folks are talking
Right.
about pretty frequently is the inequality between the haves and the have-nots and the folks that are making decisions and able to donate to the political process. And there was a show just the other day on NPR that mentioned that the amount of spending that was in the 2008 election was something along the lines of $24 million politically.
Yep.
And it's now we're in the billions.
Yep.
It is astronomically more impactful to be rich and in politics than it is to be not in trying to, yes, persuade your senator or your representative to do a thing.
And you're absolutely right. And these sorts of dark money influences, they go well beyond just presidential and federal Senate, House of Representative races. They're trickling into, look at the very expensive race for a state judicial person in Wisconsin that was a record number. Look at some of the state how races for political office. There's a lot of money flowing in with what I call single issue interests that are always not in the interest of uh, uh, an American citizen.
Yeah, that is true. We did also see that at the local level with a five-figure and I think even a six-figure mayoral race in the last couple of elections. And even my city council district, that was a five-figure race. It's,
Wow.
if you look at the data for all of this, it's expensive not only to run, but it is limiting too the number of folks that can actually step in. With corrective measures like RCV, we're seeing some of that balance out, but really, I'm curious if you think that there's a solution to this beyond like publicly funded campaigns, or what does that look like to you?
What it looks like to me is that in some cases we need to seriously reconsider and evaluate some of the decisions that are already out there. With, to me, the most heinous and damaging one is the 2013 Citizens United decision, where we basically said the Supreme Court at the time said money is speech. And that's had a devastating impact and has really opened the floodgates for the increases in dark money campaign spending that you mentioned. And sadly, there's another case that's due to come up to the Supreme Court, I believe, later this year, where you've got religious groups that can endorse campaigns. You've got more political organizations that can give money directly to a candidate, not to political parties. So it's headed the wrong direction. So Citizens United was a not good decision, and it just opened the doors to a lot of. I think we need to clean up the political process to where we're going back, for example, to look at some of the FEC, Federal Election Commission decisions of how loose and unmonitored those have become.
Yeah. Here on the local level, what do you propose? So those are big, intractable types of, it's really
Yeah.
hard to nudge the Supreme Court as an individual one direction or another. What do you see as the solution on the local level, or some way for a local Fort Collins neighbor to get engaged?
Well, there's always you can help support a candidate that you like, or you like the way that they're wired. That's these candidates all need support, and a lot of them don't have the benefit of corporate money behind them. So, helping get the word out for your candidate is important. I like the ranked choice voting selection that's happened in Fort Collins. I think it represents better the will of the voters in the area. So that to me was a positive. But support your candidates, speak out on candidates that take positions on postures that you don't like. But be involved. And I think that apathy. Did not serve us well during the November 2024 election as an American citizenry. So I would say get involved, be informed.
Yeah, a
So,
lot of
sounds
the
basic.
a lot of the decisions that people see every day are things that are happening here at the local level, whether that's the city or the county government,
Right.
and even at the state level. And my experience has always been that the folks that are the more local levels are always more responsive, receptive to you. You can go up and talk to them. You can meet them at a coffee shop here locally. You can have a
Yes.
conversation, talk to them about what's bothering you or what you care about. And they'll be happy to educate you. There's a lot of also, I think, civic education and process education that has to go into some of this. Like, how does a utility box mural appear in the
Yeah.
wild? There's a lot of steps to even something as simple as that. Or how does a new street or a new park get made? Some of those questions we try to answer here on Dear Fort Collins, but also just asking the right questions of the right people is often a great first step, so that you can become more informed and tell your neighbors about why they should also care about it too.
Yes, and I completely agree with what you mentioned. And look at the classes that are available for people in northern Colorado. Some of the City of Fort Collins classes you could sign up for, learning programs. Larimer County 101 has a program to do that. You're quite involved with the Poudre River Library, and look at some of the programs that they put on in a wide range of topics. So that's another great way to be informed.
Yeah. So we're going to interview the candidates later, so you all get a chance to listen and learn from them as well. Just hearing them in their own words as they talk to you about what is important to them as a candidate, and hopefully it maybe meshes with what you're interested into. Mike, you have a thing that you would like to walk us through or show us about your documentary and what you have learned along the way.
Sure. I am going to share my screen now, Nick, and this is basically the guts of my squeeze on the average American presentation. So, as I mentioned, the squeeze on the average American was a product of my interest in better communicating and better understanding how our government is working for us. I've probably done this about a dozen different organizations around Northern Colorado in the last 2 to 3 years. And when we talk about government, it can mean different things to different people, but generally we're talking about things like healthcare, education, infrastructure, national defense, and economy. I mean, those are some of the big segments that we would expect government to have some involvement at varying levels for. So, I will start with the first one, which is healthcare. And I'm sorry, before I get to healthcare, I do want to talk about gross domestic product. This is a measurement of a country's ability to generate wealth through products and services. And there are various organizations that measure this. It's about a little over $100 trillion annually across 220 countries globally. And the 800-pound gorilla here is the United States of America. And we have a GDP of around $29 trillion a year. That's about 1/3 of the global total. China is about 2/3 of ours, and that's increased very rapidly. They were about 10% of ours like 25 years ago. And then you go down to Germany, Japan, et cetera. But what I'd like to point out here, Nick, is how concentrated this global economy is among basically four countries that make up over 50% of the global economy. And it just goes to show you that the wealthy countries, the developed countries, have a huge share of the global economic market. And when I get into things like healthcare and education, we're going to talk about how countries spend their costs, spend their dollars compared to their GDP, and it'll show you their commitment to investing in varying areas. So let me start with healthcare. Uh, uh, I'm going to show you first a chart from an organization called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which tracks a lot of expenditures by developed countries. OECD makes up about 40 developed countries. And the key point here in healthcare is that the USA has a healthcare cost that is double the average of other developed countries. The OECD average is about $6,000. Our cost as Americans is about $12,000. So we spend a lot of money via higher prices on goods and services than most other developed countries, as you see here on the chart. Now, spending that money, you would expect that we would get a lot of bang for our buck. But sadly, that's not the case. And as you see here in our second slide, a lot of our measurements are in the lower 50% of these 40 developed countries. And in some cases, we're dead last. Start with the simple one of life expectancy. And our life expectancy here in the US is about 79 years old. And if I simply go across the border to Canada, their life expectancy is 3 years higher at 82, just by the being Canadian. So we spend a huge amount of money through higher prices on the American consumer, on goods and services, and we don't get our fair benefit out of it. So that to me is a real underinvestment area, and probably to me, still the saddest part of our overall healthcare system is that here in America, we still do not have a policy for maternity paid leave. It's 0 weeks. Every other developed country on the globe has a maternal health care policy. Why? Because it's very important for the young families. It's a solid representation of family support. And we certainly have the wealth to do this in the US, but we haven't. So that's healthcare, big area that we're underinvested in. And I could go more into that, but that's the big picture. The next part I'm going to talk about is education. And on the screen, it talks about secondary or college education, but I want to talk just for a minute about primary or elementary and high school education as we know it. There's an organization out of France called the Program for International Scholastic Achievement, or PISA, and every 3 years they spend about every 3 years they survey 250,000 students in about 80 countries and see how their scholastic results are. And in the U.S., our students rate what I would call a B average. We're a little higher on reading, and a little higher on science, a little lower in math, but we're comparable with countries like Finland, the UK, Poland, Sweden. The countries that are in the A category for primary education would be Canada, and also most of the Asian countries like Singapore, South Korea, Japan, provinces of China, Taiwan, who commit more dollars to primary education. So anyway, we're a B average, in my opinion. And let's move to secondary or college education. We have an average tuition cost of about $20,000 in state, more out of state, and 2/3 of our graduates have student loan debt, which is about $1.7 trillion. And this in America shows you a chart in the lower left. It starts at 2004 and goes up 20 years later to 2024. And you can see the blue line showing student debt and how that was about half of our nation's credit card and auto loan debt. But it's risen much higher. We've got a lot more people on student loans to the point where it's surpassed auto loan and credit card debt as the biggest debt that Americans have, until very recently because of the spike in auto prices. But for a service and an achievement, if you think of a country where we really want to have educated, high-performing people, this is not what you want to see. And if you take that student loan debt and you show it as a percentage of our gross domestic product, it's almost 8%. And that is way, way higher than other developed countries that we compete with. If you look at China, Japan, France, et cetera, it's about 1% to 2%. The only country that even comes close to us is the UK at under 4%. And here we are at 8%. So big burden on our college or trade school graduates. The third thing I'm going to point out is infrastructure. And developed countries that we compete with, such as China, India, who are more in a growth mode, they spend and are reinvesting a good deal more of their gross domestic product in their own infrastructure than we in America are. We have underinvested for a long time. There's some popular reports that are put out by the American Society of Civil Engineers that show we've got deteriorating bridges, deteriorating roads, and it's only very recently that performance has edged up because of the Inflation Reduction Act, where a lot of infrastructure projects were funded. But still, we're underfunding in this area. So those are three big areas, Nick: healthcare, education, infrastructure, where we're underinvesting. So let's talk for a minute about areas where we are overinvesting, because this money we collect has to go somewhere. The biggest one is our defense or military spending. We're spending now close to $1 trillion a year for defense budgets, which is spread all over the globe. But the big thing here is we spend more than the next 10 countries combined. The next 10 combined. No military project ever goes away. It has to keep funding. That's all tied into the military, industrial, legislative complex that Eisenhower warned about. But big overinvestment here. And I bring this up. You could argue about the necessity of it, but we're spending this at the expense of healthcare, education, and other things that progress the country. Another area where it's not really an investment, it's a loss of money. This is a simple chart here that just shows the annual federal budgets provided by the Conservative Heritage Foundation, but I like the simplicity of it. And you can see on the very top item is net interest. That's costs that we have to pay as borrowers because for the last 25 years, Congress has been unable to balance the budget, so we run a deficit and we increase our highly publicized national deficit every year. And that's a real cost that we could use somewhere else. So the deficit cost is a big one. And, I will maintain that a fourth grader could look at this chart and say, we cannot continue this, and yet 530 some odd of the very best and brightest that we've elected cannot seem to figure out that this is not a good thing. So this is our revenue versus spend chart, been repeated like this for years. And one of the reasons that we are in this boat, and is a reflection of what we talked about earlier, is that we really undercollect taxes. This is a tax to GDP chart that's put together by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And the average, which you see there in the white chart in the middle, is about 33%. So about a third of most developed countries collect tax revenue versus their GDP. A lot of countries in Europe, it's higher. But here we are in the US, we're way down at 25%. So some fiscal hawks will argue that, hey, low tax is a good thing, but it isn't if you're constantly running deficits and you can't do some of the basic essentials that you as government are charged with taking care of your citizens. So we really undercollect, and a lot of this is due to just lobbying for tax breaks, tax programs, lower tax rates to do the very infamous trickle-down economics. And when you see things like that, very biased or limited tax collection rate, this is a chart about wealth collection, and this breaks down the 133 million households that we have here in America. And on the far left is the number of households. And for the 1% of the wealthiest households, which is about 1.3 million of them, they control about 31% of the wealth, total wealth in America. If you're upper middle class, from 99% down to 50%, which is a household number of about 65 million, you control about 2/3 of the wealth in America. But for half of the American households, you only control 2% of the wealth. So it's an incredibly skewed, incredibly, I'll use the term unfair distribution of wealth. And where I want to really show this, I'm more concerned about the lines here than I am the chart in the upper left. But this goes all the way back to 1965, and it breaks out by quintile: the lowest 20%, the next 20%, the middle, et cetera. And the dotted line is the top 5% of earners. And for a couple of decades, from 65 to 85, if income went up, you kind of saw it go up the same regardless of what your wealth level was. And it was only in the mid 80s when we started seeing the impacts of reduced tax breaks on the wealthy, all kinds of tax avoidance tactics, that you see wealth really escalating for the very wealthy and just pretty much stagnant for the lower income classes. So this data shows it pretty acutely. And I'm just going to leave with some quick major takeaways here. I would say that significant healthcare and education costs over the last 40 years, they've been pushed on to the American family slash individual from government because we don't collect the taxes we used to. Government doesn't have the money to cover things like higher education costs and proper healthcare costs. In my opinion, and I believe the data shows it, we need to right size and collect. And collection is important because it doesn't happen when, for some reason, we're gutting the IRS, which is one of the departments in America that makes money. We need to collect taxes from corporations and the wealthy, which are below other developed countries. We're going to have significant infrastructure, which, by the way, should include climate change mitigation, and those costs are all going to be borne by younger Americans, unfortunately. And then lastly, I talked about this, we talked about it, the corrosive effects of special interest money on our political system, on our elections, on our legislative process. So, and I'll leave you with a very pertinent quote that was by Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who said, we can have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. And I believe a lot of the trends that we're seeing are bearing this out. So, Nick, that is the guts of my squeeze on the average American presentation. And I'm happy to, is there any comments or any questions?
uh, Obviously, there is a compounding effect of all of these things. As you have more deterioration of the infrastructure, more damage to cars, harder to get around with those same cars, the places they can go, the further distance you have to live from the city in order to, get to your jobs and other things like that. Also, just the wage gaps are creating a real disparity there. You indicated that there was earning differential, but also just a wealth holding differential.
Yeah,
That's also compounded on the other side with a wage gap that is
right.
just truly huge compared to where it had been 40, 50, 60 years ago, and has not changed in those intervening years. So I'm curious with all of these compounded extra costs. You mentioned the money is going, into defense. It's going into a couple of different other places. Now we see that it's going into ICE and some of these other, creating the largest police force in history.
Yep.
What can an average Fort Collins citizen do about these grave injustices, and how can you sort of level the playing field?
Well, that's a great question, Nick, and I will comment on one thing about the wage disparity, and there's, to me, multiple reasons for that, and some of them are what I'd call some pretty significant trends. And you've got the loss of the ranks of the union membership that was a collective negotiating power. That's dropped from probably 30% in the 50s of workers to like 10% or less than 10% now. You've got automation, which has gutted, in many cases, a lot of the ranks of the middle class or the traditional blue class jobs, as we call them. You've got the effects of globalization, where, hey, automobiles aren't all made in Detroit anymore. You've got a North American network in Mexico, Canada, and then now you've got the effects of artificial intelligence. And I read an article recently where, what used to be a junior level hire in a bank or a junior mechanical engineer, those jobs aren't needed. AI is doing that work, and there's pressure on senior managers to not incur the cost to hire more people when you can get an AI program to do it. So that's a long-winded way of saying some of these trends are the result of technology. But again, to your point about what can the person do, be informed, find out. My first thing would be, if you have a candidate that you're interested in, what are their motivations? Are they working for their constituents, or are they working for a huge real estate donor? Are they working for the coal industry, depending on where you're at? And you can learn a lot by where they're funded, which there's a lot of pressure by the wealthy to make that even more obtuse and obscure and hard to find. And that does not, again, bode well for America. We need people in office that are working for their constituents, not their donors.
And looking at the hyperlocal side, the questions that seem most relevant to this are investments in infrastructure. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, in the city of Fort Collins, we have some diminishing returns in terms of sales tax collection and the impact of small businesses. You can't continue to increase taxes on small businesses that can't afford to
Yep.
pay it. Keeping money here locally, economic development, and also minimum wage seems to be all correlated into this. Uh,
Yeah.
is there a best path forward for, I mean, we've done some really smart things in terms of just recent news stories have come to light about us working really proactively on things like flood mitigation,
Yeah.
making sure that we have the ability to handle a river's worth of water going through Old Town in a non-destructive path. It goes through our new stormwater infrastructure. And that was
Yep.
we did some unpopular things by closing some streets that made it harder to access businesses in order to get that done. And it costs money to do those things. I think, the third largest infrastructure project that the city has ever completed, next to Connection and some of those others. But it's a matter of how do we want to allocate these processes? How do we allocate our priorities as citizenry? I guess what questions can we be asking to make ourselves more prepared for that climate investment at a local level if the federal government is not going to do it for us?
Right. And, Nick, to your point, I do give a lot of credit to the people on Fort Collins City Council over the years in a general sense. I give a lot of credit to the Larimer County Commissioners who have been very pragmatic. I mean, they generally are not ideologues. That's sure not the case in other parts of the country. And they've made good decisions on good issues. And one of the reasons, and again, I did squeeze on the average American part, is I know you asked about in Fort Collins, but this data to me forms the backbone for how we should be thinking about serving the American citizens. And I'll move out south of Fort Collins a bit and look at Loveland. They've got behavioral health centers that are closed or have closed. You can't find beds for people for mental health care. And yet there's a huge amount of discussion and debate and in Greeley about, do we fund the next multimillionaires project? Well, that to me is pretty low on the list. I mean, employment in Northern Colorado is very low, one of the lowest in the country. It's manageable. We don't need more what I would call low end service retail type jobs. We could do because we don't have a 8 or 10% unemployment rate. So that to me is, I think we need to continue to look at our priorities and do what's going to work for people. But from multiple surveys that I've read, I'm sure you've read the same, healthcare is pretty important. People want to be able to go in and see a doctor and not just say, well, you have access to healthcare. Yes, you do, just like going to Maui and buying a beachfront piece of property. It's not realistic, it's not affordable, and it's not accessible. So we need to do a lot better job on those key areas. Uh, yeah, and politically, I do know that one of the things that people have measured is the so-called misery index. What if you combine the inflation rate with the interest rate and it's really high? Politicians aren't getting elected because people are generally feeling the poverty and feeling the pain. I think during the latter part of the Biden years, that generally was in pretty good shape. But yeah, we'll see where it goes with the issues with tariffs, and that's gonna roil some things in the markets.
There's a lot been made of the concept of mutual aid on an individual level of
Mm-hmm.
being able to share resources between each other, lend out tools instead of having to go purchase new ones. From a small business perspective, what does that look like?
I'm all for collaboration with other small business people. I mean, you probably heard me say this over the years, Nick, but cash flow is really important. And if you don't have to spend cash on something that you're going to use twice a year, three times a year, if you're not good at it and you know you're good friends with someone else that can help you with it, my God, by all means do it. I've often said that the irony of running a small business is that you're expected, you need to be an expert on everything, but human nature says that's not possible. You're going to have strengths and weaknesses. And ideally, you'd want to find a partner to help you with what you're not good at, just like you provide outstanding marketing services and intelligence for many people where that's not their forte. And for some people it's financial, for some people it's human resources, but there's experts that can help you with that. So work on your strong areas and get help on your weaker areas.
I think marketing across the board. Now, saying this as a marketing guy, right? I have a lot of the,
Yeah.
but the idea of what does your business do? If we give you $1, what is the thing that you give us back as a result of that? For an ice cream place, that's real easy, right? We give you joy. We get
Yeah.
here's but for some of these other businesses, it can be a little bit trickier to understand. Like, should I pay for a content writer or do I need, something more like ChatGPT? Well, of course, the content writer is going to really nail the human voice and get something absolutely, but if you don't have that money, like, are there ethical considerations there? And, how do you weigh those things? And once you get there, do you keep leaning
Yep.
on ChatGPT or do you hire the actual human to do the content writing? And
Yep.
my opinion is always, art. I have art all around my office. Somebody had designed some of these cool Legos that I really enjoy, and the D&D books behind me, and the Star Trek ships, and all the rest of this stuff. Somebody had to make that. An artist had to come in and do the thing. So I feel like there's always going to be a place for people who know their material really well, and including marketing, right? Because
Right.
we're not exempt. Like, you can have ChatGPT create a really, cohesive campaign. Will it make you a ton of money? I don't know. Like, if
Yep.
you're DIYing it, good luck. But I feel like that there's still roles for that. And if we, as small business owners, allow ourselves a little bit of wiggle room on some of the AI stuff, and then like understand that there is absolutely a time and place to hire experts, and you just cannot, like, it's a crutch that will fail you
Yep.
at some point.
Um, I will say, Nick, you asked about prioritization. I'll summarize that, but that is one of the things. If I'm talking to an expert, I would expect them to help me with. I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule. I'd rather you, as the marketing professional, give me, here's the top three things you need to do, and I want to make absolutely sure those get done in a strong, effective way. Don't give me a list of 25 things and I don't know what order they're supposed to be done in. I don't know what's important out of those. So I would clearly look to the expert to help me that priority.
And in terms of understanding and conceptualizing what's happening in processes in local government, I mean, that's where I see the ability of these tools to help us is in taking really complex, like a summary of meeting notes from a city council meeting and
Mm-hmm.
saying, can identify all of the things that I need to care about in this moment, please.
Yep.
If I care about water, like, tell me about all the things that the city council discussed about water in this moment. And,
Yep.
double check it, but have it point you towards where in the transcript those things occurred. And you will be more informed by far if you just use those simple tools in that way. Or even just asking questions of the right people, like we started
Yep.
out saying, knowing that you can call the utilities department, ask questions about what is the source of my water? Where is it coming from? Like, can I come tour the water plant sometime? And
Yep.
through CityWorks and other great programs, Leadership Fort Collins, through the Chamber, and Leadership Northern Colorado, those are all great options to learn more about how your local government works, interacts with local nonprofits, those private public partnerships, which I think are also a really great benefit for local stability and mutual aid, is ensuring that those things stay strong and that there's a reason for supporting local businesses that also invest in, like, your little league teams and other things like that, paying it forward back to them, and tipping well or whatever else you can do on a smaller scale, and picking one issue. I would say,
Yep.
in my case, is always there's so many things that you can care about, and my hobbies speak to that, I think. But there's just like, if you care about parks, then invest in parks. If you care
Yep.
about open skies or dark skies, do that, and really get in front of the city council in that way, and that you can move the needle at a local level.
And I completely agree with what you said earlier. We've been fortunate that our city council people, our city of Fort Collins employees, county people, they're very accessible. They're very willing to help. They want to help, and it's been a real asset to this area we live in.
Yeah. So, Mike, how's the musician life these days? Is it?
Well, uh, fortunately, I'm not depending on the musical income to feed me, so that's good. But I play 70s and 80s covers. It's just fun. Everybody knows the songs. We play a lot of brew pubs. I play with a percussionist who plays on the beatbox, so we have a fatter sound with that. But it is a good time, and maybe I'll keep you posted on what I'm playing if you want to come out and have a beverage. It is a fun time, and
Absolutely. Do you have a
I really
favorite venue in
uh,
Northern Colorado?
oh gosh, there's so many of them. I was up in Estes Park last Friday and played up at the Snowy Peaks Winery. I played at Funkworks Brewery. I play at up in Cheyenne at Sanford's. I've got one coming up at Construct Brewery in southeastern Colorado. I've got one coming up the Lazy Dog in Loveland. So there's if they're booking if they're booking music and they want to have people out, and it's much more prevalent in the summer, obviously, because they throw open the doors and people are out on the patio. So
Yeah.
it's fun. It's keeps my mind sharp, uh, it keeps my day busy. Yeah.
Well, where can we find out more about all the cool stuff you're working on, including your music and the squeeze on the average American?
If anybody wants more info about the squeeze on the average American, I don't have a website yet, but they can reach out to me at my email, which is Mike, Mikeoco6 at yahoo.com, or they can contact me at 970-215 2300. And I am on LinkedIn at Mike O'Connell NoCo. So that's probably the easiest place to. Most of the work that I've done with the Squeeze on the Average American has been presentations to regional organizations.
Please keep up the good work. It's
Thanks,
it's
Nick.
vital, I think, that a lot of folks understand the where we're at, because there's so many things that you can pay attention to, and it's easy to get burnt out without really having a clear focus on, really what are the issues? Like this is how we can fix this. And knowing that it's been done, there was a way to do it, so there's also a way to undo it. And I think
Okay.
that that's a really hopeful thing. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. I can't wait to learn more about your work as you continue this process, and hopefully see some progress from it as we get more candidates at the local level who understand the impacts of their decisions, and translate that up to higher level government experience as well.
Right. And Nick, thank you for having me on. I'm sure it's you, and we didn't even talk about housing and housing costs, and boy, what a big issue that is, although that's generally not
We
addressed
can.
at the
You want
national
to?
level.
We there's time. We can jump into the housing. What's your take on the affordable housing in Fort Collins and Northern Colorado? There's the housing market is fully out of control in
Yeah.
my opinion. The drive to build more and more density in Fort Collins doesn't always make sense along specific corridors that don't have the infrastructure to support it. So how do we balance those needs of a growing city and also the needs to, conserve water and have open spaces and all these other things too?
Yeah, it's boy, is it a dilemma. I will say, as a country, we are not building the number of housing units that we were 20 or 30 years ago. So uh, I don't think there's a silver bullet here, Nick. I think it's going to be a multitude of things. There's going to have to be a plan for more houses to get built. There's going to have to be much more consideration to how do we house people, and affordable housing is a constantly moving target. And what I found it generally means is just shave 10% off out of whatever the average price is. I don't I don't know how much thought we give to just other concepts of housing. I mean, for example, does every house have to have 2 or more bathrooms? I mean, we survived for 300 years generally having 1 bathroom or less in a house. I mean, I know it's nice, but is it really necessary for somebody, a young couple, young person in a starter home? I haven't done much research on housing, but it's a hot area, and the younger you are, the more painful it is to deal with it and address it. So,
A place to stay, rest your head,
yep,
but hopefully close to where you want to work, live, and play. Those are all the key ingredients. It's definitely a tricky problem that Fort Collins is facing, and Northern Colorado in general. As people are priced out of various locations, can't afford to work and live in the same city often.
yep.
So that's a really tricky problem. And I don't necessarily know that density or even additional housing or, modification of land use code is really the thing that will get us there. It seems to be much more a combination of many different things.
Agreed.
The creation of sustainable generational housing, the creation of, a number of different processes to increase our capacity, which means oftentimes, lessening our reliance on cars, using
Hmm.
more public transit or connecting more trail systems. And so people can use alternative transit methods if they need to, which also helps with, if you have a multi-child family that needs to go in two different directions for all of the activities that they're participating in, or even just to school.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot especially northern Fort Collins, where you have one car to share amongst the family, and somebody's got to get to work, and somebody's got to get to school, and somebody's got to get to a club, and you're choosing between recreating or going to work or putting food on the table. And
Yep.
you know which one fails on all of those things. It's the recreating just goes by the wayside, and that adds an additional stress.
Yep.
Healthcare costs go up. You can't touch grass.
Yep.
It's a problem. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to this compounding effect. I love that you're highlighting the complexities between these different systems that are interacting with each other and showing especially the connections of the dots between what we're choosing to spend money on, what we're choosing not to spend money on, and what we individually are being asked to spend money on because the systems that we have built to do that are not doing it for us.
Right. And I probably didn't mention this at the beginning, but what I really wanted to determine is how are we doing compared to our other industrialized competitors? So you can really see some of the areas where, boy, we're just not doing the job that we should be doing for American citizens.
Yeah. And that's such a small business friendly approach, right? Because as a small business owner, if you're doing something and it's leading to poor results, you're not going to continue doing the thing or you're going to go out of business. So
Right.
it's not really, you can't compare America at the country to a small business in that way. But because there's always going to be something that comes back in. But is it working for your customers and is it working for the largest number of constituents, in this case, for the country? I don't think so. We can do a lot better.
Agreed, Nick.
Very cool. Well, Mike, thank you again for being here
Okay.
and for diving into the sticky topic of affordable housing as well. No real answers here, but at least good discussion starting points for what to look for from our candidates as well. So when you see those interviews, drop us a line, let us know if there's other things that we should be asking the candidates. And we're excited to interview each and every single one of them, have them here on the show. So thank you, Mike, and looking forward to more of your great work.